Okay, good morning, TLD casters. Welcome to the XR playlist. I have to admit, I had a little bit of a scheduling snafu this morning, so we're broadcasting a little earlier than I have on a couple of our calendars, but here we are, and I'm so glad that we're starting out the XR playlist with our friend of TLD cast, Danny Stefanic. He's been on TLDC before. And we're very, very happy to be opening up our series this month on XR. And for those of you that don't know, XR is kind of the umbrella term for virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, is that it? That's pretty much all there are, right? Just the three, Danny, or are there more realities that we have to worry about?
Just think of it as a spectrum, from all the way from augmented to virtual reality, and XR covers that whole spectrum.
Yeah, and even the idea of mixed reality is that's sort of a combination of both. Is that right?
Yeah, elements from both.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm pretty much a newbie. I do have an HTC Vive that I get onto every once in a while, so I do play with VR on a semi-regular basis, but mostly on the gaming side of things. So that's why I'm really excited that this XR playlist is happening this month, and I'm looking forward to our talk. So for those of you that don't know, Danny is the CEO of LearnBright, which is something that I've toyed with, I've played around with. It's just a great platform. Let's see, Danny provides VR-ready tools for educators to enhance learning through avatars, nonlinear dialogue, gamification, and virtual environments while delivering increased engagement and memorable self-paced, collaborative, immersive experiences. It is a mouthful, as we were talking about earlier, Danny. So a couple questions before we get going. Where do you see the state of things right now with VR, maybe even VR ready and education? Is there kind of a general sort of statement that you can let us in on?
Well, I think we're, if you look at something like the Gartner curve hype cycle, VR is now in sort of past the hype cycle and into growth. It's definitely proven itself and is being adopted in the L&D space. And so that's really, really good to see. It's providing a real return on investment and giving real learning outcomes, which is just terrific to see. And it's beating some of the other ways that we've delivered training in the past. So that's absolutely terrific. In the games market and the marketing sort of sector, it's still kind of hit and miss. And so we're still waiting for the mass consumer growth before those things scale at an appropriate size. So for now, delivery via mobile devices is still your premium channel. And when augmented reality starts to add to that, that'll add some more value. But training has definitely become the pinnacle of the VR industry, and we're finding Facebook and all the others are moving into enterprise VR training in a very big way because they realize that's where it is creating real value, and that's where it can grow out of. You've seen that with Google Glass has been still being used in enterprise. You've got Facebook with their Oculus for Business, and you've got Microsoft pushing really heavily with their Microsoft's HoloLens for work in factories and augmenting people's performance on the job in mechanical blue-collar worker. So it's very, very interesting, and yeah, it's here to stay, definitely in this sector we were talking about.
So adoption is sticking.
Yeah, it's more than sticking, it's growing. So we're seeing more people with headsets, more experimentation going on. And something that really is a really key indicator here is most of the large organizations I talk to, they have a dedicated role for VR, AR, and XR in their organization. So you're seeing that as a set role within the organization, somebody that needs to manage that. So there's an internal demand for handling those types of things as well. And because everything's at the moment being done in game engines like Unity with programmers and other resources, it's a bit of a mess. So that's why they need a role, someone to pull together what the objectives of an organization are with the technology so that they match up. And that's great, because now there's actually a person to talk to that's a champion within these large organizations for
right. And that's interesting, because then that's a whole new role, right? Somebody that has to be really familiar with, not only just the idea, the concepts of learning in the organization, but also with the technology that they're going to be implementing or using to deliver this training. So Wow. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like a pretty big thing because people could shift like sort of their career role to that, and we actually did have somebody on recently, Alan Natichu, who is actually going to be part of this XR playlist. And he was somebody who pushed out a VR program at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And he talked about his misadventures in VR, but he had tried to do the whole thing using Apple MacBooks as kind of the base platform to build his VR strategy on, and that just did not work for him at all. As soon as he moved to Windows, then it actually started to deliver. Now, here's the one big thing that every time that I read anything about you, Danny, and for some reason this topic didn't really stick with me before, but the idea of VRReady and how I think that really helps the barrier to entry for a lot of learning professionals. Just can you explain, before we get into your presentation, just explain VRReady to folks so that it just seems like that would help people just start getting prepared a lot more for virtual reality in their training, before they even have to start getting headsets and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about where you're providing value to an organization. Doing a VR project is really costly. You usually need a couple of programmers and 3D modelers and artists, and it takes months to get to a prototype before you even start to see the value of the learning outcomes. I mean, we have clients that have come over to us, to our platform, because they've spent 12, 14, 18 months on Unity before they've even building their platform, before they get to their learning objectives. And then you've got an app that you try and deliver into an organization. And if you can't roll out an app across organizations, if people don't have the headsets, all these things that stop things from happening, which I'll discuss in a minute, that they're all these points of friction that stop things from happening. And then on the other side, you've got the people who are experienced with creating learning outcomes, instructional designers and knowledge workers. And they're not games programmers, but they do know how to deliver effective training. So, there's this, what I call the VR chasm. There's this huge chasm between VR only experiences where you've got to have a headset, you've got to be immersed, you've got to run it on a high powered computer, you've got to, really be over that side with all of the hardware and technology and the skills to build a game. And on the other side, you've got the learning objectives, which, you would like to get across to VR. And the truth is, it's all about a user-centered journey. So it's not really necessarily about being immersed in a headset. It's about changing the experience from being kind of what I call lean back learning, where you're watching a video or clicking next on a slideshow, to lean forward learning, where you're engaged in the experience and making decisions or have agency over the experience that changes the outcome. So it's the whole experience is centered around the user. They're driving it. And because they're making the experience happen, that's the important factor. Now, whether that's delivered on a smartphone or a tablet or Chromebook or a laptop or a desktop PC or in a virtual reality headset, shouldn't matter. There's only a few learning objectives which can only work in VR. Yeah. So, so we're missing out on the fact that really we need to change the way that we're looking at learning. And we can deliver that to every device, and it'll be enhanced with VR. It's more engaging, more immersive, so better retention. But not to discount all of the other platforms that are deployed within organizations, education and government, where we could be delivering these same type of engaging user-centered experiences. So that's really what this chasm is about, and why I talk about being VR ready rather than taking this leap over the chasm to VR only and all the friction points that includes.
Yes. Okay.
Long answer to a short question.
No, and it's really it was very articulate, and like Carol is saying, I love that term, lean forward learning. That's yours, right? I just want to be able to make sure like if I hear anybody else say it, I'm like, that was Danny's. Because I
use that term all the time, but I can't tell you where the words came together for that. It might be somebody else's term. If it is, whoever's out there, thank you very much.
Right. And that VR chasm, the concept of that is, I think, really, really important to sort of to keep in mind, because, it feels like a lot of people have sort of that challenge of wanting to sort of understand this topic and this subject matter, because there is that chasm in between. And I think that it's probably, maybe not as big as a lot of people think. And that's one of the reasons why I think putting together this playlist was really important for me. And so we'll get into, so right now your topic, what you're going to be talking about today is 13 reasons why VR learning isn't what you need next, and why VRReady is the real trend you need to be looking at. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and just minimize my screen, mute my audio, and just sort of let you take over.
Fantastic.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Now, I do have some slides. I could show them as well. Would that be easier?
Yeah, if you mouse over your screen, you should see a share thing on the top, and that'll let you do that.
So here we are. I think I can do this larger. There we go.
Looks great. It looks great.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, the main point I wanted to talk about today is VR is a good thing and it has lots of benefits. But as I was saying, user-centered experiences are the big one. There's also, just so people know, there is a TLDC space that was created a while ago, an auditorium where you can actually turn up. If you put that URL in your browser, you can go into a 3D space right now and actually collaborate together with others who might be present. So that's something that we've done with TLDC before. So as I said, we want to be looking at what VR can do, but why we have all these friction points for adoption at the moment. So as I said, VR is really good and it has some just tremendous benefits, allowing you to fail in safe environments, allowing people to have agency over their experience and change the outcome, being able to deliver experiences that are impossible or impractical or hazardous. We did one recently with Lloyd's Register for safety training for pressure vessels. And at the end of the experience, the pressure test vessel can explode, which of course you wouldn't do in a real live testing environment, but you can do that in VR safely and learn from those mistakes. But where VR might be really good is for motor memory tasks as well. This is where you're performing mechanical tasks. And this is where probably VR only excels. And that's one area where I'd say learning objectives of what I'm describing today don't fit into VRReady. There's something where you have to jump the chasm and go full VR. So the other part of it is you can capture just amazing data from people in learning experiences and work from that. So I did describe the VR chasm earlier, and I think there's one statement in here which I really love, which is the VR chasm is the gap between solution value that requires a specific set of VR equipment and the audience wanting to engage with that value. So that's really how I describe the VR chasm, and I think it's a great description. So solutions that bridge that gap are what I call VRReady. And those solutions have to focus on delivering that experience across a wide range of devices. It means being platform agnostic. So that means whether it's a mobile phone, a tablet, a Chromebook, or a laptop, a desktop computer, or any of the virtual reality or augmented reality headsets, if you can deliver the same experience across all those devices, then you've got reach to your audience. Most organizations don't have virtual reality headsets, or they have a few that they're experimenting with. And I'll go through the friction points in just a moment. So there's 13 reasons we'll go through. Number one is headsets, obviously. If, as I said, organizations have headsets, but they'll only have a couple. So you have to kind of choose, do you buy virtual reality headsets for everyone in the organization? I mean, Walmart did this. They bought, I think, 2 to 4 headsets per store for every single store and rolled them out. It's a pretty big commitment. And they were the Oculus Go headsets, which provide you a good immersive experience, but are also limited in some ways, and now pretty much redundant with the Oculus Quest having come out. So you've got this equipment which you invest in, and it may become redundant. And the question is, do you buy equipment, ship it to people, or do you get people to come to a location where you have the headsets? And all of that, creates a travel cost. And another reason is, do your staff have adequate equipment? So this is all about rolling out VR experiences within an organization. Remember, there's 13 reasons why you don't need VR only. So some of the experiences require room scale, high performance computers. The laptops that run with, let's say, mixed reality headsets from Microsoft need to be pretty powerful as well. A lot of organizations still have older spec notebooks and laptops that won't be VR compatible. And the newer ones are, the ones that are more powerful are heavier, low battery life, and they cost a fair bit. And the devices where you put your mobile phone in, Google Cardboard, or those plastic headsets you can buy in lots of stores, they're actually a really, in my opinion, a really terrible way to experience VR. They're very affordable, so it's great for people that want to experiment with VR. So new developers or people who just want to tinker and are willing to go through the configuration and issues they might need to set up. Because remember, with these mobile VR experiences, you don't know what phone somebody's going to have. You don't know what configuration, what resolution, and any trouble they run into, they've got to self-support. And so these mobile VR experiences are, a pretty poor thing. I have a few clients, they get the Google Cardboard, they print them out, they get them branded, and they give them away at conferences, which is terrific as a marketing exercise, but you can't be sure the person who puts their phone in these devices is going to have a good experience. So I generally recommend, if you're going to have a VR experience, get one of the higher end headsets, like the Oculus Go or Quest or Pico or any of those, and that way you'll know that your users are actually having a real quality experience. And the VR headsets are still relatively bulky, and generally, if you're going to build an experience to run on them, you're going to need to run it on Unity or Unreal game engines, which require a lot of resources as well. And I've got a note there that VRReady equals progressive enhancement. What that means is VRReady experiences, you can have them work on a mobile phone all the way up to VR without the author needing to re-engineer anything. So as long as you access it with a device, the experience will adapt automatically across any device that you access it with, giving the same learning outcomes. I just mentioned before, configuration with phones. The same goes with all VR equipment. I've used Oculus Rift headsets and HTC Vive and had to reinstall and set things up at presentations. It's a bit of a nightmare. So those things are still, progressively getting better and better, but you can still run into a presentation. You need an hour ahead of time to make sure that everything is set up right before you get your learners to go into an experience. And when using augmented reality, for example, you might need to pre-scan the environments with things like the HoloLens, and all these things provide points of friction for setting up. So you end up wasting time for participants. Now, the IT department in large organizations is also a point of friction. You'll often find that deploying an app, organization-wide in large organizations is something that may not even be possible. So one of the things we look at with LearnBright is delivering everything through a technology called WebXR or WebVR. It means it runs in a browser, so you don't need to install anything special. And this is something that's becoming commonplace across every browser. But at the moment, with traditional virtual reality, you need to deploy an app, you need everyone to install it on their devices, and that just provides a significant point of friction, and that's something that IT departments will just say no to, and then you're stuck. And that's, again, apps. There are lots of different ways to deploy on different platforms. So if you're running Oculus, or you're running a Vive, or you're running Cardboard, depends on which platform you're using, Microsoft Mixed Reality as well, or you need to build an app for each different app store or each different platform. One of my colleagues has 14 different applications that they've had to build to deliver one type of experience to cover the market. So could you imagine maintaining and managing 14 different apps just so you can get your learning experience across? So a bit of a logistical nightmare there. And that's another reason why VRReady, or delivering via web technology, is so much smoother. In fact, we launched the Microsoft HoloLens 2 has just become available last week, shipping. And we were the first platform to be compatible with that, even before it was released. We're talking to people within Microsoft. They could try our experiences out on the HoloLens 2. And we were the first learning experience put onto the HoloLens 2 because nobody needed to install an app. We just gave them a URL and they could experience it directly in the browser immersively. So that goes to show, even before a product's released, we can be compatible with it. Everyone else is now building apps on top of the platform to try and catch up to where we are. So it's just a smoother, future-proof way of delivering experiences. Then there's security. We go through, with large organizations, audits for security, and it's a big piece of the puzzle, not just security, but also data privacy and personal information. So when you start to introduce new VR systems, app stores, and new content through this channel, it has to go through the full audit and assessment. So it's another big point of friction. And usually you'll find the security and IT have some things to say about that, and that can stop a project cold. You don't want that. Again, being VR ready means you can deliver it across all devices. Specifically with our technology, we can export experiences as SCORM, just like your traditional slide-based SCORM experiences, deploy them in a learning management system as a course, and enroll your students in it. So it's that simple. So it just slides right in with all the existing platform security and policies that are in place. So you don't want to exclude remote users. We're seeing more and more remote staff working in companies, and if they're not at the headquarters and you've got a few headsets there, those people are not going to have those experiences. So this is another point of where having them use whatever device they have available, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet, to do the same user-centered experience is really important. And then when they do get access to VR, they'll have a more enhanced and immersive experience, which has greater learning impact, but there's no reason they should be excluded from that same user-centered experience that you design. And as I mentioned with learning management systems before, each of these platforms has their own sign-in mechanism or account mechanism. So even though you might produce a VR app, you might need someone to register their headset as an individual consumer. But if you're passing that headset around to many users, that's where you get significant points of friction as well. What if they're getting their personal messages in there and they have their games in the headset? That's not something you want to pass around to other people within the organization. Now, some of the suppliers are getting better at this. So Microsoft, with their HoloLens, has got integration with sign-on through the Microsoft platform. Oculus has a new thing called Oculus for Business, and that helps to manage the devices within the organization. But again, kind of in a silo, separate to everything that the organization's already doing. And this is where I love how we integrate with SCORM and LTI and other services, so you can just deploy directly into an organization automatically and not have to worry about yet another platform in the organization, yet another sign-in or integration that needs to be done. So that is definitely a point to consider when rolling out these type of experiences. Another one is actually physical practicality of the space you have for VR. VR requires some room to set up, especially if you've got external trackers, and then you have this environment that a person needs to be able to move freely in. So do you set a room aside, which I've seen in several organizations, and have that dedicated space? Or in an office where somebody's going to train, they have to move the furniture out the way just so they can do that experience. Those are considerations again for rolling out VR experiences. And I'm saying simulator sickness here, but I'll expand on that because there are people that just don't want to use VR. I remember it was back in the mid-90s, I think, when we were the first sort of set of virtual reality headsets were going out. They were very low powered, low resolution, but we were at trade shows and there was lines, incredible long lines for people wanting to have a go. So I remember one woman came up and I gave her the headset to put on. She said, "I can't wear that." And I said, "Why not?" She said, "Well, it's going to mess up my hair." And I thought that's completely logical, and it will. This is a big bulky headset. It would really mess up And there's all sorts of considerations there, but there's also people who have had VR experiences and been ill, or even think that they're going to be ill having one because they've heard about somebody else doing it. And you've got these points where a person doesn't want to have that experience. And that should be okay. A person shouldn't be forced into a device that they don't want to be. So allowing them to have an alternative experience on a tablet or a phone and still have those same learning objectives is really important. So, thinking that VR is going to be fully adopted by everyone in an organization is also another point of, kind of idealism about how you deliver training to everyone. And another important sort of friction point is vendor lock-in. If you're going to go with Vive headsets, as I mentioned with Walmart, they've got the Oculus Go headsets, you kind of then bought into a particular platform and supplier. And the apps that you build match those particular ecosystems and capabilities as well. And that really ties you in. Unless you've got the bandwidth and programmers and money to go build 14 different apps and make sure that the learning experience can track across all those different experiences okay with the same learning objectives, then that's fine. But vendor lock-in can be really restrictive. But again, if you go for the VRReady approach, works across every device. And how I explained earlier with the HoloLens 2, we were able to deploy something even before the device was released because it was future-proof and web-ready. So that's another aspect to consider when you're going out to deliver a VR experience or learning objective for an organization. And of course, recording scores. Most of these VR experiences that people have built sit in isolation and they don't have a way to talk to your existing learning management systems or LRSs or any way to keep a score. And so you have a different tracking system to see who's done the experience or nothing to track people at all. And that's really, it's not integrated, it's disintegrated. And that just removes value for an organization. If you can plug it straight into an existing learning management system and track who's done it, how their performance was, then you get a real return on investment. So integration with those type of technologies is super important, and in general, in the industry is super immature at this moment. So there are very few platforms I know of that even are SCORM compliant or allow you to plug into an LRS. So yeah, calculating the real true return on investment for VR. So we know that organizations are buying some headsets to experiment with. Clients like Walmart and others are the tiny percentage that are really all putting both feet in. And getting them to get the procurement department to approve headsets for a whole division or many people is really hard. And building a VR experience is pretty costly. You have to think about getting Unity programmers, 3D modelers, 3D artists, and the cost of building a serious game or a VR experience, you're looking around the 200K mark. It's pretty expensive. And that's for a basic VR learning or training experience. And if that's for one device. So let's say you build an experience, you get it done really cheaply, and you start and you get it done for, let's say, 50K. That might work on the HoloLens, but then you've got to build it for the Vive and the Rift and the Quest and whatever else you want to deploy on. And if you want to build something that also supports collaboration and multi-user, where you can have multiple people in an experience at the same time, the costs go up even further. And we have that. We have the ability for people to jump into a space in real time, meet each other. One can be using a mobile phone, another one can be using an Oculus Quest, and they can meet in an environment, regardless of what technology they're using. So as it says here, VRReady allows organizations to get the highest return on investment. And really by bringing every user into accessing the experience. And that's really important. So there's a link there where you can go to a free trial if you want to, but that's really the top 13 reasons why being in the VR only camp is full of friction, whereas being VR ready allows you to kind of deliver an experience where an organization can justify it. They can get a return on investment, and then they can start to experiment with VR at the same time and learn from those experiments, rather than doing these huge commitments with high risk and not knowing that they're going to get their learning objectives delivered to the entire organization. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to share today. There's obviously a lot more, and I'm open to questions if anyone has some.
Yeah, Anne actually has some questions. She also actually mentioned here, you can see it in chat, that the 200,000 for building the game out seemed to a bit on the high side for her, and she's a game developer, so she would probably, no, that does seem a little bit on the high side. But I don't know, like I don't know much about or anything really about building building VR in Unity, but you know, that she just wanted to mention that there. And she also does have a couple questions in the Q&A area. Thank you, Anne. One of her questions is how do you best instruct traditional instructional designers to work with your system?
Well, that's a great question. And well, Anne knows a bit about our system because we're actually working on projects as well together. So, the premise of the platform is really to help existing instructional designers with their existing skills learn to build user-centered experiences. That is, that focus around the user at the center of it. And so the platform has tools that allow people to create experiences without necessarily needing to program. So you can jump in, you can create a space and then drag and drop objects wherever you want, furnishings, create a space from a template, or use a 360 image or 360 video as a background. You create characters or bots from 1 billion style choices that we have, anything from a construction worker to someone in medical scrubs. And then you write the dialogue of the characters just using plain old text. And we support text-to-speech in 51 languages. So you just write down what you want the character to say, add some gestures to them, say who they're talking to, and also present questions to the learners. And this way you can kind of create branching scenarios based on actions the user takes, changes the outcome of the scenario. And so we have a tool that's called ChatMapper, actually. And ChatMapper, we acquired it a few years ago. It's used by most of the major game studios to create their kind of epic storylines for games and keep track of all the logic of that. And that's built for writers. So yeah, it's relatively point and click, drag and drop type experience, but it is different from traditional slide-based training where you have a linear learning outcome, or video is usually linear as well. So you have to change your mindset a bit to what is it that, giving the user paths to expand on and choose from. And often that can get unwieldy if you provide too many of them. So you need to kind of create like a plot where it branches out, but then it comes back into a point again. And that's how you create almost episodic segments, micro-learning. And that's something that this type of technology is really good for, because experiences are usually shorter, rather than asking yourself, can we build 30 or 60 minutes of training? You're really asking about what are the learning outcomes and how short can we make it, and how in-depth can the experience be so that the user learns very, very quickly. And generally with VR training, you're finding the learning times are much, much shorter, 10, 15-minute experiences tops, to have a practical experience on some particular learning outcome.
When you're talking about this, I think that maybe it might be a little difficult to conceptualize the idea of VRReady unless you're actually just sort of in it, right? So like, it might be worth, let me ask you this. Could you actually record sort of an interaction, or like sort of the LearnBright platform? Is that something that we could actually go in and maybe do a recording of and show us around the features, like say in the TLDC room? Is it possible to do that if I were to put on my headset? Not right now, of course, we'd have to probably schedule some other time, but I would love to be able to supplement the playlist with that, kind of like the experience of being within the LearnBright platform. And maybe you could even talk about like how you've managed to achieve some successful learning objectives, right? Or successfully achieve some learning objectives, like using the LearnBright platform. Is that possible? Is that something we might be able to do later on?
Yeah, absolutely. And you said very interesting thing there was you're not ready to put the VR headset on right now and go into it. Well, that's exactly the point. People might be doing other things. What if we could go into that experience right now? So, for instance, if I I'll do a quick little screen share, very, very quick,
Okay.
of the TLDC auditorium.
Okay.
So here we can see I'm choosing an avatar. I can change the way they look. I click continue and I jump into a 3D experience on my laptop at the moment. I could do that on my phone. I could put on a virtual reality headset and jump into this experience as well. So anyone can join us in here. Actually, there are some users already. You can do gestures, you can move around. I can even go into immersive mode instead of seeing my own avatar. I can go through the eyes of the avatar. So there's another person there. You can chat and say hello. You can put on these screens here. You can share your webcam and so forth. So somebody's saying hello there in the bottom chat. So, it's really, really easy and fun to add things. There's a lot of stuff in here because we've had other TLDC events. There's actors, there's an AI character there, this cowboy. So you can see there's very interesting things to be whipped up really quickly. There's a link to XAPI, live videos that can be played if you want to. I think that's a TLDC cast from the past. So it's really quick and easy to mock these things up. You drag and drop furniture where you want, you create characters, change the text of what you want them to say just by typing it. Very, very easy and fun to do.
Interesting. Is there a way to actually record an experience via your platform, or is that something we just, maybe just doing a screencast of it would?
Yeah, we don't have a built-in recording feature, so it's just doing a cast of it and some sort of screen capture. Yeah, but we do have live built-in calls, so you can do a presentation in there to multiple people, project to the video screen if you want to, just like we're doing here, but within a 3D environment, but accessible to everyone. It doesn't matter what device they join on, but it's more fun in a VR device because then you're there life size. Mm-hmm. So it adds more engagement, and that's obviously a more powerful experience, but no one should be excluded. That's the point.
Can you give us maybe a success story of something that you've seen that was particularly memorable, of how the platform was used to do some training?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few different use cases for the platform. There's one that I'll be writing a little post on soon. There's a government conference in Australia for sort of recruitment and job training. So students could go in and learn about the particular jobs beforehand. And that's been ongoing, I think, for 7 or 8 months now. And that's a space that people can go in, talk to virtual characters that are there 24/7. So you don't need any staff. The bots are there to answer the questions. And there's lots of exhibition material around explaining the particular roles and jobs in a way to get students to get a bit of a taste of what a job might be like before they go down that path. So career help, and that's an interesting one. Others have been in creating full onboarding, almost universities for large corporations. So new hires would go in, they could watch and consume content that already existed in the organization within a 3D context. So most organizations already have PowerPoints, videos, SCORM modules in their organization. So a quick way to get a win is to leverage those, put them in a 3D space as items that you can consume and watch, but while doing it while other people are present. So if you've got a cohort of 40 people all doing the same coursework, they'll run into each other. They can have those water cooler conversations, really creating a learning culture, as opposed to traditional online training, which is isolated and a lonely experience. Everyone's in the learning management system doing their 20 courses, and that's that. But if you make it a social experience and people from different regions and different divisions get to run into each other, that's really good for the organization overall. There's just a couple of examples.
Interesting, very interesting. I want to get to a couple of questions that we still have here. Another one from Anne, and she asks, what are the most frequently missed features because of traditional learning design methods? And you might have to elaborate on that maybe Anne, but what are the most frequently missed features because of traditional learning design methods?
Okay, I think that the key there is flipping to a user-centered design. So I think people have to have that perspective and try it out, and it takes a bit of time. Most frequently missed features of LearnBright, I see, is the
Yeah,
elaboration on the
there you
question.
go.
I'd have to say multi-user is probably missed. A lot of people come into the platform seeing our examples of self-paced training, and they don't know that there's these multi-user capabilities. So the instructor-led training and online role play capabilities are not used as much as I would think they would be, especially in healthcare, for example. A lot of role play goes on in the real world for training, and that can be applied into the virtual sense as well. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned that is to do role play in a virtual environment is so quick and easy compared to building a self-paced learning module, which takes some time and effort. If you have a facilitator in the space, being the virtual patient or being the virtual customer, then that's really easy to deliver. Nobody has to leave their desks. You don't have to organize, some sort of event at a physical space. So that's I think a point of use for the LearnBright platform that I think is under-leveraged.
Very nice. Mark has a great question. And actually, you talked about this a little bit before. Which industries, let me get this. Which industries are prime for VR to experience growth in the next few years? And I know that one is more of a general question, but
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, but go ahead.
Yeah, look, our biggest clients are pharmaceutical and finance, but that's just because of their size and maybe oil and gas. So that's because of their size in the market. So I think client-wise over LearnBright, we're distributed evenly across every sector. And I think it's just the same as digital transformation. Each organization is at a different point in their life cycle of being adopting and using digital technology as well. And that's all over the place. In each industry, you'll have companies that are high, companies that are really low, and it's really the company's appetite for innovation that is the key indicator for whether they're going to adopt VR. Some of the kind of factors that push for VR adoption and make people explore this as a solution are things like millennial learners, people with shorter attention spans, people that just don't want to sit in front of a 30-minute PowerPoint presentation anymore because they're not absorbing it. So they do the training, they go out, and they're not retaining any of it. So there's this engagement problem. And I'm not saying it's the people themselves or that the training was not good to begin with, but there is an expectation now in the market from all of the technology that we use today, all of the apps and online services we use that are so polished, with millions and millions of dollars spent on making those user experiences really nice, really engaging, and something that we're almost addicted to. And so we have those experiences, and then we switch over to the corporate environment, and we're doing an hour-long PowerPoint presentation in a classroom, and it just doesn't meet the expectations of what we're used to. And that's where organizations are realizing that, and they're saying, okay, what can we do to increase engagement? What can we do that will help people retain the knowledge? And that's driving the interest in finding more engaging experiences. And VR just happens to be one of those very obvious highlights that can do that. And again, from my perspective, it's not about VR, it's about the user-centered experience that is the important factor.
Have you seen anybody like sort of do any type of blended scenarios or situations that successfully doing, like integrating, say, like LearnBright into other sort of training modalities? Can you give that?
So LearnBright works with all of the learning management systems. So there's lots of stuff happening where they deploy experiences and enroll users in doing them. And then there's the multi-user ones as well, where people get together in a live event. But in classroom training, it's being used as well. So traditional classroom training, like the one I was just describing, you still have your lecture-based material that you might run people through. But what I've seen quite common is actually that classroom learning being augmented with maybe 2 virtual reality headsets in the classroom, where they do the initial training, and then people get to have a go in that training in the VR headsets. And then that might be part of an onboarding experience. And after that, the rest of their training they're doing on their traditional flat screen device. But that VR experience provides a hook, something that really gets people excited. And if I read right, one of the outcomes from the Walmart adoption of VR, there was actually a performance increase from people who watched others do the VR experience. So it wasn't even that they'd done the VR experience, it was the fact that they watched other people doing it also increased their engagement in the topic overall. So that was a very interesting side note on the research from that. So I think having that different modality, that different experience is part of it. And it doesn't mean you have to buy a headset for everyone, but it does mean that you have something that changes. You can have that learning by following the materials, but then a little practical learning by doing experience that just makes the whole thing more memorable. And that can be a value add very simply and easily. And don't forget, those experiences can be tracked. So you can have that performance data pushed back into the learning management system, or LRS, as well.
Right. And I think it speaks to sort of your concept earlier, the lean forward learning, which is just, says everything about engagement. Let's see. Michael Harris is asking a question too. He says, "Hi, Danny. Out of curiosity, what is the current percentage of users who engage with VR versus AR versus desktop?" I don't know if you've.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good
Depends
one.
which sector we're talking in. I mean, if we're talking about consumer market, it's very different. Now, with AR, we're only at an experimental stage with that. Our platform does support AR actually really well. It's just the same as building an experience with a virtual room, but you take the room away and leave the assets, the people and the items that you interact with still remain. And then when you go into AR, augmented reality, that is, overlaid on your real world. So in my office, I'll have the bots standing there next to me, and interactive objects that I can click and work with. So the percentage of market for AR and VR, I think AR overall will be the much bigger market, but that's because I see it as eventually a replacement for the utility of the display on a phone. So primarily you'll be using glasses as a way to see the information that you normally would look down at the phone for. So I see that as a big consumer play. So that will definitely shift in the next 5 to 10 years incredibly over to glasses-based displays. It is really the next phone. So that's where you should probably, if you're going to place bets on where your company's going to go. VR provides a whole different experience. You can be fully immersed, and that takes you to another place altogether, which is actually much better for having virtual meetings and those sorts of things rather than using augmented reality. There's whole sorts of issues with augmented reality because you're not in the same space. People have to be placed logically somewhere. It's kind of a funny thing, AR meetings. But one thing I think is important to note is the amount of people that actually use VR. So with our platform, it's only a very small percentage of people that are engaging in VR. The rest are all doing it on flat screens. And that's because the organizations don't have the equipment and all those other friction points I mentioned. So if you're delivering experiences today, you really have to consider the laptops in organizations and mobile phones that people might be accessing with, and tablets, as the primary way to do it. And VR is that experimental component. So I hope I've answered the question. There's no hard percentages there, but maybe we can, if we qualify exactly which market, I can get some figures about where they're being used more. Yeah.
No, I think it's great. And so kind of just to wrap up, so the 13 reasons that you gave, those were all reasons, those were all friction points that that users will have being able to get into VR learning. And what I just sort of want to get out there, so LearnBright, you can overcome all 13 of those friction points by utilizing a platform like yours, just to clarify that.
Yeah, look, I'd say I'd like to call them considerations. If you're going to get involved in VR learning, those are the 13 considerations, questions you should ask yourself about the organization, how you might roll something out. So one of those might be a requirement. It might be a requirement that they need room scale VR because they want people to walk around in some sort of experience. So if that's a requirement, yes, it's needed. We don't necessarily solve that. Our platform will work with it, but it doesn't solve it. So they're considerations, things to put on your agenda at the very start of your communication with a prospect or client or project, rather than waiting till later and then running into these points that may cripple a project or add, just undue costs that really and time that you don't want to run into. So that's the real reason for those considerations. LearnBright is a unique platform. It really is built as an on-ramp for today's instructional designers to go all the way up to VR. And on the flip side, reduce all of the reasons why organizations would say no to adopting VR in the first place. So it's really to create that the jump across the chasm, the VR chasm that I mentioned at the very beginning.
And something that I probably should have asked in the beginning, but you're obviously really passionate about talking about this. How long have you been in the VR space again? I remember you saying it's been like over 20 years.
Yeah, I'm showing my age. But yeah, back in 1994, I started the Virtual Reality Association. And even prior to that, in fact, pre-internet, was building VR experiences. Way back then, it was called Garage VR. People would hack together all sorts of great experiences using technologies to create VR experiences back then. So I've been doing it for a long time, and I am really passionate about it. But more so, I'm passionate about the impact it's going to have on human history. And if I just take a minute to explain that, when the internet came along, we took all the media types we had before and we digitized them: audio, music, video, photographs, text. We took all that and we put it, started using that on the internet. And there's another media type, and it's really growing. It's a media type that's called 3D. And that's the way we record and capture real life experiences in 3D, where we can navigate around freely. And that content type is relatively young. It's only as young as computers, where we started to have 3D models. Prior to that, we had sculpture and architecture and museums, maybe, as the capturing of 3D content. But now it's a digital medium, but it's not quite yet at the critical mass like those other media types I mentioned. Yet it is the superset of all of them. And when that, as a media type, hits critical mass, this is a point in human history where it's all upside from there on. That type of media is going to be pervasive, consuming, and it'll be a part of human history from then on. And we're at that point now. We're in this kind of fuzzy in-between time where it's being used in all these different sectors very, very well, and it's quite mature, but it hasn't got to the point where it's hitting consumer critical mass yet, but it will. And that tipping point, that point in history is just going to be incredible. And anyone that's involved in any part of that sector is going to enjoy unlimited growth. For me, it's not even a field that's competitive. We're at this very tiny beginning of it. And I work with lots of other companies and other organizations who are doing similar things. I love what they're doing and I support them as much as I can, because all together this is going to be just a huge human experience, and that's what drives me.
Wow, that's very inspiring. So, I mean, why hasn't it hit critical mass yet? I mean, I've seen really interesting sort of spatial audio technologies that have just come out that it's like, wow, what is that going to be like? But what's it going to take to be able to get to the point where you think that, we'll hit that critical mass? I mean, that
I think you're seeing it now. You're starting to see AR being adopted. Even just for little entertainment components in Snapchat and Facebook Messenger and those sorts of things. So that's one part, but that's also working into scanning your environment, knowing more about your environment, knowing more about the human form and position, and being able to overlay things on top of that, or remove the environment that you're in and take you somewhere else. These are all happening on mobile devices now, and that is starting to become the consumption or the user-generated content pipeline. So the more that happens, the more we're going to see that become a media type, a shareable media type. So we are at the stages where the technology and the mobile devices are allowing that to happen wherever you are in your own context, and that's where this media type comes from. there's more work going on for standards as well. All of the browser manufacturers are working on WebXR, which is the new standard replacing WebVR, which has been around that most people aren't aware of. But it means all the devices will have this capability in the browser as well, that we will be able to take all of these technologies and capabilities and put them into our existing web-based experiences rather than all these silos where they've been hiding at the moment. So that's really part of unlocking the access of these technologies to everyone who's out there building web technology.
Now,
and that's happening right now.
One more question, and then I know I've got to let you go. But so, education. You're obviously passionate about education as well. When when we're talking about a technology like like virtual reality, it seems like you could have gone different paths, especially just your passion overall. I mean, you could just have gotten into gaming or to something else entirely. But why have you stuck with education? And I sort of want to hear that, because that's pretty much everybody that's tuned into this broadcast or listening to the podcast. They're going to be of the same mindset.
Well, I actually own a suite of businesses, also consumer-based virtual worlds and games. So, we own Virtual Berlin and Virtual New York and Virtual London, where people live and buy virtual furniture and pay rent on virtual apartments. And so we're in all those sectors as well. Pretty much, as I said, I'm interested in anything around 3D. But for me, when VR was starting to take off again, this is a third wave of VR for me. I really looked at the market closely, and games, the VR only camp means you've got to be a hit with games or marketing to make any revenue, to create a sustainable business. In the education and training sector, it's quite obvious that what was to me the return on investment that you could get if you could deliver something the way that we're delivering it. And any company that's going VR only is in a very difficult position to create sustainability. And that's where I saw a bit of an opportunity mixed with the death of Flash. So all of the serious games work that was being done in e-learning kind of died and went away. And then at the same time, the rise of mobile and all the different screen sizes and orientations that meant all of the traditional slide-based training that was based on a fixed window size didn't work. And so most of the tool sets kind of regressed back into the dark ages and said, okay, we're just going to do simple slide-based training now and forget about all those bells and whistles that we tried to do with Flash and serious games. So for me, the engagement level went way down, but this new technology was coming on the market and there's just no tools to fill the gap. So I saw that as pretty much the primary opportunity, and it's been a hard road to do that, not using the game engines out there and asking people to install apps. But it's been a worthwhile journey. It really, really has. So, get everyone who gets to benefit from our I think it's 4 years now of building the LearnBright platform.
Wow.
And it's been a fun challenge.
Excellent. And I want to remind everybody that is in the chat that you can go to learnbright.com/TLDC to check out the LearnBright platform. Danny has generously sort of created a room for us, and I know Anne has been in there. I don't know if any of you are still in there right now, but it looked like we had a couple people that were running around in there earlier. Definitely check it out. I'm going to post the link in chat again here. So jump in there. And Danny, I want to thank you once again for coming on to TLDC and sharing your knowledge with us and being our opening sort of speaker for the XR playlist. And I'm thinking about I might try to supplement this whole thing with a sort of a journey into LearnBright at some point, and then I'll post it in addition to this in addition to this episode. So
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming in this morning. Really appreciate your time. Tomorrow we've got Kristen Hayden Safdie with John Temples. He's an instructional designer and a consultant. They've got a great topic lined up for tomorrow. And then Wednesday, Steve Bambury is going to be doing the second episode of this XR playlist. And he's going to be talking about CPD in VR. He's based out of Dubai. And that's something that I just realized too with this whole series. Pretty much the majority of the speakers are outside of the United States. So, and you're in Spain right now, Danny, is that correct?
I'm in Spain, but we're based in Phoenix, and if people can tell from my accent, I'm Australian. So, a bit of an international thing happening here. Yeah.
All right. And thanks for posting that in there, Danny. And we'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow and Wednesday. All right. Take care.
Thank you.